Well, does James Gunn's new DCU have a Batman problem? Well, Batmen problem? We've been getting all kinds of reports the last couple of days about various Batman projects, and none of them are good news. It seems like the first real challenge to James Gunn's leadership at DC Studios is at hand, and it's revolving around one of the most important characters who has multiple projects going on, and none of them can seem to get off the ground. Let's take a couple minutes to talk about what's going on with both The Batman and Andy Muschietti's Brave and the Bold, rumors about what's going on behind the scenes, some reasons for delays, and what I think might really be going on. Well, it seems like James Gunn's first real challenge is at hand, and the question is, what is going on with all of these Batmen? As I was just saying, this seems to be a real problem because both of the Batman projects that they have being developed seem to be hitting various snags and delays. Now, before we get into each problem, I do want to highlight that James Gunn made it very clear that Brave and the Bold was going to be very early in the first chapter of the new DCU. And since the announcement of Andy Muschietti being the director, we've really had no news. Now, we do know Gunn won't do anything without the proper scripts, and this means the script is done, not in development, and this seems to be impacting both projects. Now, all of this is outside the obvious problems of having two different Batman characters coming to this big screen at the same time, or close to the same time. And the longer these delays and problems keep churning, the more this becomes a huge problem, and a decisive direction needs to be taken by James Gunn to make sure this stays on track. Now, first and foremost, the Batman Part 2, or Batman Part 2 as it's being called, was originally set to drop in theaters in 2026. But now we do know it has been moved to October the 1st, 2027. Now, this is a whole year delay, and it is actually the second time this movie has seen a big bump. Now, the first time was because of the Hollywood strikes, and at that point it was scheduled for a 2025 release. But now, everybody's been working for a while, and this definitely seems like something's wrong behind the scenes to me in the writing process. Now, I want to point out there have been some very, very unsubstantiated, unconfirmed, and likely untrue rumors of, well, drama behind the scenes. I'm not really sure how true any of this is. These people are all professionals, obviously, and it's not unusual for there to be creatives butting heads during the creation process. But we want to keep in mind if there is some kind of conflict. Obviously, Matt Reeves was working on this project before James Gunn came along. Well, that could be playing into it in, well, rather unusual ways, and it does make one wonder if part of the reason all these things are kind of, well, off compared to everything else going with the DCU, could there be some kind of details we're all not privy to that are causing these problems like contracts, obligations, or Matt Reeves' overall creative control of Batman that's interfering with what James Gunn wants to do? Well, that's all completely unsubstantiated, but obviously could impact a production like this. Now, this is hugely disappointing because this means it'll actually be 5.5 years between The Batman and the second entry, and that's assuming it actually arrives in 2027. It will have also been almost a full 3 years since The Penguin, and honestly, for a franchise you're trying to keep relevant, that is not a good thing. Now, James Gunn has pointed out lots of big franchises have seen huge breaks between entries, even his last Guardians of the Galaxy. But to be fair, the Guardians were a big part of Infinity War and Endgame, so it's not like they were absent. Most of his other examples included things like Avatar, and these are not your normal franchises. Now, Gunn has since broke his silence on why the film has been delayed, and he flat out said the only reason for the delay is that there isn't a full script. He went on to say, quote, Matt is committed to making the best film he possibly can, and no one can accurately guess how long a script will take to write. Once there is a finished script, there is around 2 years for pre-production, shooting, and post-production on big films. Now, this is where I start to get a little worried, guys, because the fact that the script isn't done yet, almost 3 years after the last movie, that's huge, and suggests to me one of the main problems is getting this to come together. Now, this could be because storylines are conflicting between what Matt Reeves wants to do and what James Gunn is planning to do inside the DCU. Now, we have heard there's a big visual effects budget associated with this project, and this could mean villains like Clayface, who Gunn already has a DCU project for, or even Victor Freeze, who would be a fan favorite and rather unexpected with all the teases of the Court of Owls. Now, like I said, reports are indicating there is no chance of Robert Pattinson becoming the new DCU Batman, and honestly, I think it would be a huge mistake. First and foremost, you are never going to get Robert Pattinson to frequent the character as often as whoever plays Batman inside the DCU will need to play the character. Like we just saw, it's going to be about 5 years between these films, which means it's going to be about 5 years between Pattinson shooting the first film and the second film. And I'm pretty positive that he is not the kind of guy that's going to take a Chris Evans or Robert Downey Jr. path and be roped into projects once every year or once every 18 months. This is a big problem for James Gunn's DCU if they wanted to use him, and I think one of the primary reasons they don't. Now, as far as The Brave and the Bold and James Gunn's Batman, well, that has a whole nother series of bad news associated with it. Now, if you remember, when the news broke that Andy Muschietti would direct The Brave and the Bold, this came our way right as The Flash made its way into theaters. Now, it's unsure to me if this was a sign of faith in the filmmaker or to distract everybody from what proved to be an absolutely disaster of an opening weekend and a film that had, well, lots of questions. We'll probably never get the answers to that. But since then, fans have questioned James Gunn's decision to bring Andy Muschietti into the fold for the Caped Crusader. Now, to be fair, Michael Keaton's scenes in The Flash were probably the best part of the film, and if there's any character he seemed to have a great grasp on, it was Batman. Now, recently Muschietti was flat out asked where things are with The Brave and the Bold, and his answer was, especially to me, really disappointing. He said, quote, "The Batman, The Brave and the Bold project has been postponed a little bit, so I might do another film before that." I get really nervous when people start using words like postponed, because that suggests to me that there's little or no movement going on at this moment. You see James Gunn greenlighting project after project at DC Studios, and we have a lot headed our way in the next 2 to 3 years. But it appears at this point, none of those projects will feature Batman, and I'm not sure how he wraps up a big giant DC Universe showdown at the end of Chapter 1, well, without the Caped Crusader. This whole report suggests this movie is a long way from becoming reality, and it's highly unlikely that both The Brave and the Bold and The Batman Part 2 will open anywhere near each other. Meaning, if we see The Batman Part 2 in 2027, well, this leaves 2026 and 2028 for this upcoming Batman film, and if it's been postponed and Muschietti's moving on to another project, that's not happening until 2028. Now, I appreciate James Gunn doing everything he could do with scripts, and making sure the script is clearly ready for a project before it moves forward. But I am starting to get really worried that these delays are starting to stack up and create a bit of a traffic jam, which could be very narratively restrictive. Now, with all of that said, I have a lot of faith in Gunn running DC Studios, and for right now, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. The first trailer for Superman was awesome, and Creature Commandos is, well, one of my favorite animated shows. So he's got some home runs under his belt so far, and all the other upcoming projects like Supergirl and Lanterns look to be shaping up nicely, so we're going to have some faith in DC Studios' leadership, but we all should be paying close attention because we are starting to get to the point where we might want to consider being genuinely worried. You can't have a DC universe without Batman, and if you got more than one Batman, you can't have them running into each other. So James Gunn's got his plate pretty full here. Hopefully, they get a great script for Andy Muschietti to work with, and we can get some solid plans around The Brave and the Bold. Some of the supporting cast, such as Bruce Wayne or Damian, or several members of the extended Bat family, who's going to be Nightwing, and he really needs this key part of the Justice League front and center to make the universe come together. Until we know more, what do you guys think? Do you think James Gunn is facing his first real leadership challenge in working out what's going on with both of these Batman projects? And should Gunn keep his very strict control over scripts, even though it seems to be impacting the release of the film, and how it impacts other storylines for the greater DC universe? Tell me what you think in the comments below.